We the lazy declare that we will recline when we feel inclined. And yes, we feel inclined.
We answered our kids' questions all day. It's our time to prioritize, no priorities.
Why?
Because
we put in back-to-back doubles. So now we'll be putting in extra OT right here.
We've checked off our to-do list.
Now we're checking off our to-don't list.
we the lazy are taking back lazy.
By getting comfy on our Lazy Boy furniture.
Lazy Boy. Long live the lazy.
When storms start to blow and danger strikes, we come together to face any challenge as a community. And when trouble hits our county, HCFL Alert is your #1 source for information. HCFL Alert is with you before, during, and after the storm. To sign up, visit hcfl.gov/HCFL Alert so we know how and when to notify you about local emergencies. The safest way through bad weather is together.
Time, weather, and
How you doing, everybody? I'm Chief Meteorologist Dennis Phillips. Heat, still the hot topic of weather conversation, right?
Streaming from the ABC Action Weather Center in Studio A, this is Dennis Phillips Live, brought to you by Lazy Boy Furniture Galleries. Long live the lazy, and by HCFL Alert.
Yeah, heat is not the hot topic of conversation tonight. How y'all doing? ABC Action News Chief Meteorologist Dennis Phillips here on a Saturday night. I will be in again tomorrow night. Now, our 6 o'clock news we ran on streaming. So if you're watching on streaming, we are going to be on this platform for an hour, probably the same for Facebook as well. There's only so many things we can go over in terms of what's happening. It's a lot of speculation, a lot of forecasting, and you know, we're gonna get into it. We're gonna have a lot of folks here. We're gonna take our time, and we're gonna discuss the possibilities. But if you've been on DPO for the last couple of days, we were talking about this. Milton started as a tropical depression in the Pacific. It went across Mexico and has developed right on cue in the Western Gulf. Now, the thing is, it's actually developing faster than the models were saying. And because of that, it's getting more organized faster. So the Hurricane Center is kind of speeding up the process. All right, so here's what I want to do. Again, we got lots of folks here. We're going to get a lot more. This will repeat, so you'll have a chance to kind of, if you missed something, you can go back. For the folks watching on Instagram, I've said this before, I don't know why Meta does it this way, but Facebook and YouTube, you watch this way. Instagram, the video is this way. So the right and left side of this is going to be cut off. So it's harder for you to see, but I'll still be kind of talking about everything a lot. So you'll kind of have a good idea of what we're thinking about, even though I do know on both sides you are going to get cut off. All right, so let's go ahead and just take this stuff full, all right? And we're going to kind of go through step by step of what we're having now and what our expectations are. We've got a lot of time to go through this. We're going to talk surge. We're going to talk extreme winds. We're going to talk track, the whole 9 yards. All right, so here we go. We're starting with the latest, winds of 40 miles an hour, Tropical Storm Milton moving north-northeast at 3 miles an hour. There's a very large player in this group, and it's you I'm talking about out there. No. There's a very large player, and it is the cold front that's going to be coming in from the north. And that is really the key to this forecast. And by the way, it's also why we always say that October is that month that we always worry about here on the west coast of Florida. Because what happens is stronger storms want to go more toward the poles. They'll go poleward. And that is why I think the models have been shifting a little more north in the last couple of hours, because the forecast is that this is going to be a little bit stronger. And the stronger it goes, the more likely it's going to be drawn toward the poles, north, right? If it's in the equator, it's south. But what we often also see this time of the year are cold fronts. And there's going to be a pretty solid cold front digging into the northern Gulf by early next week, by Monday. By the way, for the record, tomorrow I will all but guarantee we will be under a hurricane watch and a storm surge watch. And I would expect it will probably extend from Fort Myers maybe to Crystal River, ballparking it, maybe even a little bit more to the south. But that's kind of what I think the initial watch is going to be. A hurricane watch and a storm surge watch for the entire Bay Area and areas to the south. Probably tomorrow morning, maybe in the afternoon. By definition, it's usually 48 hours, so they might hold off until later on in the day. But it's going to happen. But like I was saying, you get a cold front that comes in. These storms that develop in the Caribbean are going to want to go north, and it's why the majority of them go into the Panhandle, at least in August or September. But what happened, or the Big Bend, right, which is what has happened. But what happens in October that we don't see in August very often, or September? You get cold fronts. So as a system's coming in from the south, a cold front comes down and kicks it to the right. And that is what is going to happen here. The timing in which that front comes in, the intensity in which that front comes in, and the amount of dry air, and I'll show you this later on, the amount of dry air that also comes along with that southwest shear, which could very easily get sucked in to the storm. Dry air is not good for hurricanes, and if indeed that happens, you would expect that the intensity would level off and maybe even weaken a little bit before landfall. That is one of the possibilities. In fact, that's the possibility that the Euro and the Icon and the Canadian models are showing. The GFS, hashtag cha-ching, if you know, you know, will have none of it. The GFS is right, the American model is all about keeping the core intact, not letting the dry air get in, and barreling into landfall as a Category 3 hurricane. That is the GFS forecast. It can change. And this is kind of a twisted way to look at it, but I have no doubt you guys have felt the same way. All right, so, and again, I'll talk about evacuations and talk about what I think coming up as we go. Folks, we got a lot of time. So just sit back, maybe watch some college football. Last I saw, Bama was losing to Vandy by 9. Go figure. And we're just going to go over this. So there's the initial motion, north-northeast at 3. And it's slow to develop. Okay, here is the 5 o'clock track. We're going to talk a lot about this track. Obviously, you look at this, and this is pretty much the least favorable track for the Bay Area. This brings in a Cat 3 hurricane. Now, it's only 5 miles an hour more than the 11 o'clock advisory, which was Cat 2. It was Cat 2 at 110. It's Cat 3 at 115. And it's marginally stronger. But the track on this brings a Cat 3 major hurricane right into the Bay Area at Wednesday afternoon. All right, let's talk about this, all right, because this is really important. So you look at this track, and I've seen so many people already say this on social media. They're like, oh, well, look, you know, look at the track. They must think it's going to be going this way a little more because the track's a little bit more to the right than to the left. Okay. Going to teach you something right here if you're not part of our DPL group. That track, that cone, has nothing to do with this particular storm. All right, the Hurricane Center isn't saying, well, you know what, the models are more south, so we're going to give a little more weight to the right side of the cone as opposed to the left. No. All that cone is the average margin of error over the last 5 years at the Hurricane Center at that time slot. So at 72 hours, the average margin of error is X. So that cone will be that distance from the center point where the forecast track is. It's all it is. Nothing to do with, well, we think it's going to be this way, so the track is this way. Nope. At 72 hours, the margin of error on average in the last 5 years from the Hurricane Center forecast has been 150 miles. So you've got a line across at 150 miles. That's all it is. There's nothing about this storm to it. So this particular track, that margin of error goes down pretty much to South Florida and up into the Big Bend. That isn't because the spaghetti models are that skewed. It's because that's the average margin of error. So just know that. As we get closer to landfall, it's going to get closer because the margin of error is usually lower the closer we get to landfall. All right, so there you go. So let's get back. So a couple of other things. I cannot find anywhere in recorded history that we have had a storm come in at this angle at this time of the year. Usually the storms come in from the south, right? They come through the Yucatan, and then they kick right as the front comes in, and then we have to deal with that angle in which it comes in. That is not the case with this one. And that is probably not good news for wherever landfall is going to occur, all right? And let's talk about that, because that is obviously the key to what everybody wants to know. How will landfall impact even away from it? This is the bottom line. With the storm coming in at this angle, the storm surge will be along where the eye crosses, and the worst of that surge will probably be about 10 miles from the point of entry to 10 miles to the south. Your extreme surge is going to be in a very small area. Now, there'll be some surge in other areas, but that is more than likely what we're looking at. Now, let me show you what I mean here. This is as of the 5 o'clock advisory. This line will move north. But as of 5 o'clock, this was the coastal flooding assessment based on a track that you see at 11 o'clock, which is what the NHC has. It has not updated yet. In fact, I don't think. Let me check and see if it's updated. No, still hasn't updated. So look at where the surge is based on where landfall occurs. There's your landfall, and look at where the surge is, to the south. A little bit up north, but almost all to the south. Why would that be? Makes perfect sense. Because south, you have an onshore flow. North, you have an offshore flow. So wherever this, we always tell you, don't look at the line. Don't look at the line. Well, in this particular case, you're going to have to look at the line, because that line is the key to where the extreme surge and the extreme wind is. Let's say that this was accurate. All right, let's say this was accurate. The extreme wind and extreme surge would be right about there. That would be the point, maybe even closer, about 10 miles. So I don't know, that's how many miles is that? Is that more than 10? Maybe. But about 10 miles either way. And the majority of it is south of landfall. Okay? So this is very different from Helene, because Helene went up and straddled the coast of Florida, and because of that, that entire surge just traveled right up the coast along it. But because this is coming in at a right angle, south of where landfall occurs is where you are going to get your surge. The extreme surge and the extreme wind will be probably about 10 miles from the eye. The wind will go both sides. The surge will go more south. Think of the entire coastline of Florida. So here's my point. Overall, the odds of you right now watching at home, the odds of you being directly impacted by that 10 miles is relatively low based on the entire west coast of Florida. But unfortunately, somebody's going to get it. There ain't no way around it. This is not going to turn and miss Florida. No, it's not going to happen. Might it weaken somewhat? Yes, that is a possibility if that drier air comes in. But this is not going to miss Florida. So coming in from the angle that it is, we are looking at landfall if it's, say, Cat 3. Let's say the forecast is right in intensity. Could be more, could be less. It's 4 days out. If that is the case, then 10 miles north and south and east from that point of landfall, we'll see 100 to 110 mile an hour winds. That will be the extreme area of winds. Got that? 10 miles from the center, north, south, or east, we'll get 100 to 110 mile an hour winds with gusts even higher. They will also have surge. If this is a Cat 3, you're talking a 10 to 12 foot surge. You're talking a surge in that small area, center and south of the eye. You're talking about a surge that will likely be 10 to 12 feet, larger than Helene, comparable to what it was in Horseshoe Beach, probably, in the Big Bend, based on a Cat 3 making landfall. If it's stronger, it might be more. If it's weaker, it'll be less. But overall, my point is the area of extreme wind and extreme surge is a relatively small area, 10 miles or less. Now, what happens from 10 to 20 miles? All right, then you probably go down to 85 to 100 mile an hour winds, Cat 1-ish. Those are the kind of winds that are going to knock some trees down, and unfortunately, with all the rain we've had, I'm sure there's a lot of root systems that are weakened, and there will be trees down. There will be power outages. Look, this is not a pretty picture regardless. I mean, you often hear me talk about ways that we can miss, and certainly the Bay Area itself can miss the effects if this were to go more south or north. But Florida ain't going to miss this. This is going to impact Florida directly as at least a Cat 2, in my opinion, and probably even a Cat 3. All right? Timing. Let's talk about that. And again, we'll switch over. We got lots and lots of stuff to talk about, lots of time to talk about it. Forgive all my tabs on the computer. All of our Roll Number 7, all of our fundraising that we do is through Etsy, and that's all right here, and we donate the proceeds this month to Hurricane Helene victims. And unfortunately, we'll see if that's going to need to also be another area of damage, which I'm afraid to say it probably will be. But this is on the top of my Facebook page, so if you want to donate, you get this cool merch, and those proceeds go as well. Anyway, that's why all those tabs are open. I'm not fanatical about a million tabs. I get a lot of grief over that. So, all right, hold on. I gotta block people. I just noticed there's a spammer here, so let me ban from all live streams. Okay, you are banned. Whoever that was, they are gone. Okay, I haven't even been looking at the comments, but that's it. All right, so anyway, here's a look at the most likely timeline for tropical storm force winds. Here's your time frame, okay? The west coast of Florida, probably between around 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. on Wednesday morning. You have all tomorrow, all Monday, and all Tuesday to prepare for this storm. So don't, as my mom says, don't get caught with your pants down, all right? Take this seriously. If there was any lesson we learned from Helene, take it seriously. Now, no, this is not going to be the same kind of surge on a widespread scale as Helene was. We already covered that. It's going to be a much smaller area. But unfortunately, the area that is hit from landfall south, remember, landfall eye south is where most of that surge is going to be. It's going to be worse than Helene. So if you have a landfalling hurricane in central Pasco County, it's going to be devastating for Pinellas County and southern Pasco. It is. If you have a landfall in southern Pinellas County, it's going to be more Manatee and northern Sarasota. Again, do the geography in your head. Wherever landfall occurs, 10 miles south. From that point to 10 miles is where most of the extreme surge will be. There will be more surge, but it's going to drop off a lot more. This will not be as large of a system as Helene was, and if the Euro's right, it's going to look like a shrimp. And that's what often looks like as a system has dry air drawn into it. But there's your time frame, all right, for tropical storm force winds. The worst of these winds will be late morning Friday through early evening on Friday evening. This will go inland. This will cross the state. So wherever that line is, extend it across the state, because they're also going to get hurricane force winds. Now, by the time it's on the East Coast, it's going to be down to a 1. Again, based on current track. Maybe it'll be weaker than this. Maybe it'll be stronger. We're still in that gray area. But there will be hurricane watches for inland areas as well. This is not just a coastal event. Now, surge is, obviously. And surge will be in a much smaller area than the last one, than Helene. But nevertheless, it is probably going to be more extreme in landfall and just to the right of landfall or just to the south of landfall. There's some of the latest spaghetti models. Obviously, a lot of them are pinning it in on the central part of the Bay Area. There's some south. There's not many north. We'll see how that changes as we get more data and as this starts to take shape. But obviously, this is a real significant threat for our area if you're watching in the Bay Area. If you're watching with kids at UT, if you're watching with kids at USF, all right? If you are considering relocating those kids, and I'm not saying to do that, let me be really, really clear about how I verbalize this, all right? You are not going to hear me say, should I evacuate? And I'll tell you, you should or you shouldn't, and then something happens to you on the roads, and you die on the roads, or something happens, and it's just devastating for all parties involved. I will not go down that road. I will tell you whether or not what the wind conditions and the surge conditions will be in those areas, and you got to make your own decision. USF is inland. USF will be dealing with wind. Typically, the expression, hide from the wind, run from the water. That's usually the expression. Now, if you live on the coast and this is a Cat 4, you might want to run from the wind too. The problem is, the later you go, the bigger traffic issues are going to be. Remember with Irma? People were stuck on the roads. They could not get out. Couldn't get out. Couldn't get gas. Couldn't get out. It was a nightmare. We've done things allegedly, supposedly, to make that better, but I'll believe it when I see it. So, I repeat, the old expression, you hide from the wind, you run from the water, usually anything less than a Cat 3, that's a pretty good thing. But when you start talking stronger Cat 3s and 4s, and even 5s, if you're near that 10 mile, and again, 10 miles is what I'm talking about. Think of Andrew. I'm not saying this would be an Andrew, but think of Andrew. It was a small storm, and you had an area that was devastated, Homestead, about a 10-mile region that looked like a bomb went off. But you get outside that 10 miles, the damage was significantly less. Okay? So if this were to get to a 4 or something, or God forbid a 5, at that point, you got to do what you got to do to keep yourself safe. And if that means get away from that 10-mile area, then you do what you can do. I'm not saying it's going to be that, but we're throwing out the possibilities here, okay? But typically, my point was at USF, if this is a 2 or a 3, people are probably going to be pretty safe. You're going to have no power. See, this is the thing a lot of people don't think about. Yeah, you might be just fine in terms of damage, but you might not have power for 10 days or 2 weeks. And living in our area with no power and no electricity and no air conditioning and no water is a nightmare. So I often tell people, you're not necessarily evacuating for safety, which obviously if you're in an evacuation zone A, you are. But if you're inland, if you're a couple of miles inland, and you're like, all right, I'm going to be okay from the wind and I don't have to deal with surge or flooding. But if you're going to be dealing with no power for 10 days, that's the worst. So those are the things you need to consider. If you do decide to ride out the storm, on my Facebook page today, I posted a list our family put together over the years, and it's got great tips on ways to prepare for a storm that you're going to ride out. Because let's be honest, some people don't have the ability to move, to go inland and go somewhere and be there for 10 days. They have to stay home. They have to stay put. If you're in a mobile home and you have a Cat 2 or 3 coming in, you better get to a shelter, because you don't want to be anywhere near a mobile home if a Cat 2 or a Cat 3 is coming in. And that includes Polk County, because if you have a Cat 3 hurricane move in and impacts Polk County, it'll still be a Cat 2 or 3 when it hits Polk County. And they always say, if there's winds of 65 to 75, you should get out of that mobile home and go to a shelter. Shelters fill up. If this is a direct landfall in the Bay Area, and it looks that way 24 hours out, shelters are going to fill up. So you're going to want to make that decision early, okay? If you do decide to ride it out, that list might be pretty helpful. All right, let's go to the next map. All right. Okay. GFS ensembles, obviously they're just all in on Central Florida. All right, there's some a little bit more north. Now, that's not saying these cannot change. They absolutely can. But right now, and this is what we're dealing with, look, we all know this stuff can change. And matter of fact, I think a lot of us say we all expect it to change. I think I said this before, maybe not. This is a twisted way to look at it, and I feel bad about the science in saying this, but it's what everybody does, or a lot of people do, and I'm guilty of it myself. If you look at a track that's 5 days out, or you look at a track that's 4 days out, and you see the pinpoint of where that storm is, how many times have you said, well, it's not going to hit there because it's 4 days out and it's never going to be where it was in 4 days? And most of the time, you're right. Helene was not one of those storms. Helene, that forecast was flawless. The NHC and the models did a better job in Helene than I've ever seen with a storm. But most of the time, you're going to be right. So what do? Do you hope that it's going to move? Or, these are decisions that you guys got to make on your own. Now, evacuations, again, common sense tells us wherever this ends up, if you're within 10 miles of that eye, you're going to get the worst of the wind. If you're within 25 miles of the eye, you're going to get 75 to 90 mile an hour winds. If you're within, normally hurricane force winds will extend about 50 miles out from the center, and they're a lot lower once you get to 30 miles out. Again, I'll say this again, that 10-mile radius from wherever landfall occurs and south, 10 miles, is where the devastation could occur. It's a word I don't even like to use, but if this is a 3 and it makes landfall like that, then yeah. All right, here's what I was talking about with the Euro. Okay, so there's the Euro, and the heavier rains start on Monday, by the way. We're in a flood watch. I think the heaviest rains get in here on Monday into Tuesday. No wind Monday. We're fine. Problem is we've had so much water already that we're going to flood. All right. At least some areas will. There's that shrimp I was talking about. I want to show you this. Now, your center of your storm is like right here, right there. There's the dry air. A little smiley face. Okay. Never mind. I digress. There's the dry air coming in from there, okay? If this system can draw in some dry air, it will weaken it. At the very least, it'll keep it from intensifying all the way through. The GFS is not bringing the dry air in from that front. The Euro is. Several other models are as well. The Canadian is. I will tell you, the Euro is actually in the minority in keeping this isolated from the drier air. And you can clearly see right here that this track, like that, yes, it is like that, but with drier air coming in, it's going to be a slightly weaker system. Now, when I say slightly weaker, it's still going to be a hurricane, but it might not be a 3. And the way this, and I'll show you this in a couple minutes, I don't know, maybe in 5 hours, probably know how long we're going to talk here, but the thing you need to remember, Cat 3 and higher is when you start to see some damage that's significant and potentially structural. Typically structural is 4. You have a category 1 or a 2, you don't normally see structural damages. You certainly don't want to be in a mobile home, but you don't normally see structural damage. And then again, look as it goes across. See how it looks like a shrimp? See that curve? That is dry air coming right in there. So the Euro, it can't be any clearer. Look how that dry air comes right in to the bottom where it's clear down there, and you get a weakening system. So to me, that's obviously our best case scenario. Because I'll say it again, folks, this thing ain't gonna miss Florida, all right? Just accept it that what we're dealing with is a hurricane that is going to hit Florida on Wednesday. Where it hits Florida is still very much in doubt. Rainfall totals. Through Monday, we're going to have 2-3 inches of rain coming in off the Gulf. And then the numbers, this only goes through Tuesday, actually. The numbers will obviously be higher on Wednesday. But because it's going to be a pretty quick-moving system, I would be willing to say we will not see nearly the kind of flooding with this storm that we had with Debbie. All right, that is significant because that same trough that's going to hopefully bring some drier air in there is also going to accelerate this storm faster. So this is not going to be a slow-moving system as it approaches. It should be accelerating as long as that trough starts to pick it up and we start to get that impact, okay? So less rain. I mean, we're still talking, we can see 5-7 inches of rain. You add that to the 3 inches already, and we're already soaked. There will be flooding. My concern is all the trees out there that have been weakened because of the rain that we've already had. I was talking to Greg D a couple days ago, and he's saying, Dennis, do you know there's a chance that we could have 100 inches of rain in Tampa this year? And I was doing the math. I'm like, dang. I mean, drought? That's a word I'm not so sure I'm going to be using again for a while. But the point is, with the ground loosened and saturated after Helene with the surge, after Debbie with the rain, we're going to have trees down. We're going to have power outages. So I'll say it again. Evacuations. There's a difference evacuating for safety. This is an important point here. There's a difference evacuating for safety as opposed to a difference in evacuating for comfort. All right? Safety is if you're in a mandatory evacuation zone, and I hope to God people after Helene will be like, all right, yeah, I saw what happens. I'm going to leave if I'm in a mandatory evacuation. Here's the difference. Helene had widespread surge. I hate to say this, but this one will not. It's good, but it gives people more of an excuse not to evacuate. The surge will be in a smaller area with this, but the surge will be more extreme with this in that 10-mile area from landfall I south. Again, as we were saying. Now, we don't have any official surge numbers yet. We won't until the Hurricane Center puts us in a watch, which they will tomorrow. I will bet my bottom dollar tomorrow we will be under a hurricane watch and a storm surge watch on the west coast of Florida and in inland counties as well. This map you see here are the probabilities of tropical storm force winds. It's going to happen, right? There's just no way around that. So that's kind of where we are right there. Let's go to the next map. I got more stuff to show you here because there's a lot of people out there who are watching who have never gone through this before and don't understand what a lot of the terminology is. All right, so the yellow color are the tropical storm force winds. Look at the time. That's on Wednesday, late Tuesday night, Wednesday morning when it enters. Then you get the heavier winds coming onshore. Now, this map does not show hurricane force winds, and I don't know why. It's not the setting on the, because it did show it on Helene, so maybe the Hurricane Center didn't put it out yet because it's too far out. But I'm showing you this map just in terms for the time frame, okay? So you look at your time frame. Some of the fiercer winds come in around 10 or 11 o'clock Wednesday morning, like I was saying. Move all the way across the state. Look right there. Look at where you're asking who's going to get the strongest winds, and look at your area you're interested in. That orange area is up toward hurricane force winds. South of Gainesville, based on the current track, through Orlando. So if you evacuate to Orlando, you are going to probably get hurricane force winds if the track verifies as is forecast. If it's more south, you might not. All right? I'm going to tell you what I did. I'm going to tell you what I did because I'm actually pretty, you know me, I'm pretty transparent about stuff. So people are asking, have we decided whether or not my family is going to evacuate yet? Haven't decided yet. I'm not on the water, not in a flood zone, but I'm probably about 2 miles from the coast. So it depends on where we see things are shaping up. Personally, what I did, I made 2 reservations. I made a hotel reservation in North Florida. I made a hotel reservation in South Florida. And what I did is I made a reservation on sites that you don't have to pay up front and you can cancel within 24 hours of the first day of your arrival, and you don't have to pay anything. That's what I did. So my goal is, if it goes more south, my family can go north. I mean, and by the way, personally, we only evacuate if I'm expecting Cat 2 or higher with extended power outages. If it's a Cat 3 or a 4, then yeah, they're going to get out of Dodge. If there's going to be a Cat 4 going into Pinellas County, then I think a lot of people are going to evacuate. Some are going to hang tough, some are going to go to shelters. But that's what I did. So I went onto websites that don't require money up front. You can just put in a credit card to hold. And if you cancel within 24 hours of your first day, they don't charge your credit card. That's what I did. Because even if it's a Cat 2 for Pinellas, that means no power for days on end. Think of Irma. We never had sustained hurricane force winds in Pinellas County or most of the Bay Area in Irma. The only area that had sustained hurricane force winds was Sarasota County and Polk County. Inland areas had it. Nobody else did. And we still had no power for 3 days to 2 weeks. So think about your safety with surge. Think about your safety with extreme winds. And think about your comfort with no air conditioning and no power for potentially a week or two. And I'll tell you something else that's going on, a little inside information here. And I'm sure it will be remedied by Wednesday, but a lot of our linemen, a lot of our TICO people, a lot of them have been relocated to the Carolinas to handle power outages in the Carolinas. Now, again, I'm sure they're going to come back, but they have been worked harder than any human being should ever have to work. They had to deal with Helene here. They've had to deal with the devastation with the power outages and the flooding in the Carolinas and in Tennessee and in Georgia. And now we're going to have to deal with it again here. So that's what's going to happen. Somebody's asking about flights. All right. That's a good question. I don't know when TIA, based on the current track, would close the airport. The winds are fine on Tuesday. You can get in and out weather-wise on Tuesday. No problem at all, even into Tuesday night. I just don't know at what point the airport's going to say, nope, we're getting everybody out of harm's way, we're closing. Can't answer it. But the weather will be flyable on Tuesday. All right? That was a question we get a lot about. And of course, check and see if you are going to go to a shelter, if it comes to that point and you're going to go to a shelter, check if they allow pets and they have to have carriers. Remember those things. Again, like I said, look on the list that I have on Facebook, that I posted on Facebook. We put it together over the years. It's a great list. And it'll give you some tips on what to do if you're deciding to ride it out, as I think most people inland will. All right, let me talk about that one briefly. If you live east of I-75, I think most folks are not going to evacuate. And I think you probably don't need to evacuate. Personal preference, I'm not going to tell you one way or the other, but most of the evacuation orders and voluntary evacuation orders are people within a few miles of the coast, where they're dealing with surge or they're dealing with extreme winds. They had 110-mile-an-hour winds in western Polk County with Irma. The only area that had an extreme wind warning was around Bartow. And I remember it because that was the first time I'd ever seen an extreme wind warning issued by the Weather Service locally. And it was when Irma came through, and they had about 110-mile-an-hour winds in Polk County. So there are still going to be inland areas that are going to get every bit the wind the coastal area is going to get. But I'll say this again, if you're just tuning in, the extreme winds, the worst of the winds, are going to be in a 10-mile area from that center. You go out 25 miles, they're going to drop down 20 miles an hour, maybe down to 90, 85. You go 40 miles out, they're probably barely 75, based on the current track. So these are all things that will kind of come together tomorrow. You guys know me, I'll be posting 24/7, and so will Greg. I'm trying to keep my voice because I already hear my voice cracking and got a long week ahead. But the evacuation, that is going to be up to whether or not you feel comfortable staying and whether or not you feel like handling no power for a week or two, if it really comes out to that. All right, so there's your forecast tonight. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take one more thing for you here. Let's go look at some models. All right, we got to do this. All right. Here's the latest Euro spaghetti models. So if you look at them, comes across. I wish I could get closer, but I can't with this map. It's a global one. Now, what does this show you? This shows you that the Euro says this could go anywhere from Tampa Bay area down to South Florida. Unfortunately, the stronger storms are more toward the north, and that's what I was telling you about. Stronger hurricanes are drawn more toward the poles. Therefore, a stronger hurricane would likely impact the Bay Area more so than Southwest Florida. That is, unfortunately, the way this is going to play out more than likely. If it goes a little weaker, it would be a little more south. And if it brings in some of that drier air and shear, it could be weaker and go more south. But I'm afraid to say I do think if this does get stronger, the odds are higher that this is going to be a storm somewhere around the Bay Area. Okay? Tomorrow you're fine. Monday you're fine. Tuesday you're fine. You have 3 days to get stuff done. There's Sunday. This is the GFS. I'm going to call it the 18Z as well. Okay, there's the GFS on Sunday evening. There's the GFS Monday evening. You start to see some rain coming in, but the main storm, you now see it Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock. 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning. 8 p.m. on Tuesday morning. All right? That is a 962 millibar hurricane. That's about Cat 2, I would say. There is what the GFS has been hinting at now, about a 951 Category 3 hurricane. The 951 is the pressure. The lower the pressure, the stronger the winds. That's why the Hurricane Center, I think, is going Cat 3, because they're deferring to the GFS, and then it goes across and goes out to sea. All right? Call up the 18Z. Call up the 18Z and see if it's changed any. I don't know if it has. I literally have not looked at it. So we're about to find out this together. All right, so here's the 18Z GFS. See if it has any kind of changes at all. Models will have a tendency to change. This is the wrong. This is the north central part of the U.S. We're not looking at snow. There we go. Okay, southeast. Okay, here's the 18Z GFS. Supposedly, allegedly. All right, tomorrow morning. All right, there's Monday. There's Tuesday, 8 a.m., Tuesday, 2 p.m., Tuesday, 8 p.m., Wednesday, 2 a.m., 8 a.m., no real change. 958. Maybe a little weaker. Also, more north. So, my friends, this is a perfect example of what we were talking about, all right? This could not be any clearer. We are 4 days out, and you are going to see these models change, some more to the north, some more toward the south. It's called the windshield wiper effect, and it's going to drive you crazy. If you are hinging on every single model run, you will have an ulcer by Wednesday. It is what happens. They do this. So here's the problem. Someone will look at the 18Z, oh, look, it's getting weaker and it's moving more away from us, so we're okay. They're going to go back and forth. You just have to trust the process. And by Monday, remember, you have all of tomorrow, all of Monday, all of Tuesday. By Monday, there's going to be agreement on this. Doesn't mean we still can't see a little bit of change at the end, because we often do in Florida, right? But my point is, in showing you this, the 18Z, look how that track has changed. It is at least 50 miles more to the north, and that's landfall in Citrus County. See that? So I would expect the 0Z to probably go back down again. But we look for trends in these model runs, and this is why posting operational runs on social media gets me so mad. I got on my soapbox yesterday and was just steam was coming out of my ears because I was so ticked off. Because I see all these, and I don't know most of these. I mean, honestly, they show up on my feed. I'm sure they show up on your feed. You're scrolling, and you see all these people who really have no clue about weather, and they just like to post the worst case scenarios. And, you know, they'll post these runs, and it'll freak you out. I mean, it does me. I just get mad. But my point is, we look for trends, and the ensembles are a much better way to look at it because it gives you more of a broad view of everything, okay? So anyway, that's something. And by the way, most of you guys know I'm good buddies with Mike Boylan, Mike's weather page. Mike's a local guy, Oldsmar, has a huge following on social media, great guy. Mike posts a lot of different things, but Mike does not just post worst case scenario. That's what ticks me off. Mike will post lots of different models. His site is great. His site is awesome with so many things to choose from. And he'll post lots of different models, stronger ones and weaker ones, right? I'm talking about the ones that just post the worst case to try to get a rise out of you. They get a rise out of me, but not in a good way. I'm just like, it just drives me crazy. Anyway, so my point is, look at 18Z as a pretty significant change, which means nothing. Well, let's look for a trend, okay? Okay, so let's go to the next one. This is the older one. This is the Euro, okay? And the Euro, Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, 8 a.m., 2 p.m. Look at the bottom. You start to see the shrimp. The drier air starts coming in right there. See that? See how there's drier air right there? That is what we want. I mean, a best case scenario is that this trough digs in a little farther south and starts to bring in some drier air. That would be awesome if that happens. And look at this. Look at by 8 p.m. at landfall. Yes, this is landfall in Pinellas County with a 977? Hard for me to see. 977, that's Cat 2, all right? But look at the shape. It looks like a shrimp. It always reminds me of that song my kids like. How many shrimps can't eat? I don't know, whatever. My kids love that song. It's been out for a long time. So that is an indication that the Euro is drawing that trough in farther south and bringing in some drier air and some shear. So that would be awesome, especially if you live south. If you live south of there, you would have far less weather than the north side. But that's still a 987 millibar hurricane, which is Cat 2, but that's the kind of subtle difference that can be real significant. We can handle a 1 or even a 2. It's when you start talking 3 or more is when you start talking about big issues. All right, and here's the Euro AI. If you're new to this, it's kind of a cool thing. I like to mention what it is. So all the other models take the state of the atmosphere and use their algorithms and whatnot to create a forecast. The Euro AI is new this year, and what they've done is they've gathered data for the last 80 some odd years, as much data as they can, and then the computer takes the current state of the atmosphere and compares it to other times in those last 85 years and tries to find the closest match and makes the forecast based on what happened before. It's climatology, and it makes sense. But of course, it's never exactly the same. But anyway, the Euro AI has done pretty well this year. So the Euro AI also brings a hurricane in and also brings the dry air in. Look at that. I did not notice that earlier. So the Euro AI, the time frame, and what is that? 985 once it's over land, 977. So it's about the same. So interestingly enough, the Euro AI and the Euro operational run is almost identical. I love quoting my cousin Vinny. So, yeah. So that's, you see what we're saying. GFS, 12Z to 18Z, has probably gone 50 miles more north. Euro is more south and weaker with more dry air. There's still a lot of game to be played here. There's still a lot of things that can and will happen. So when we say don't freak out, rule number 7, don't freak out, that started out back in Hurricane Isaac back in 2012. When people were freaking out about a storm, I'm like, no, I think it's going to miss us. Don't freak out. Unless I'm freaking out, we're fine. But it kind of changed into my mantra, which is how are you going to make decisions to protect your family, to protect yourself if you're freaking out? You're not going to make good decisions. So you try to keep your head screwed on straight and know that you have 3 days still to decide what to do, to prepare, if you're going to hunker down, then to get your stuff ready. If you're going to go elsewhere on Monday, you get your stuff ready. My concern with our experience here, and by the way, are there any other maps to show? There are. Let's look at the 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock is in. Nope, not quite in yet. Thought it would be in by now. What was I saying? I can't remember. Let's go back and take the current again. Stand by, call this up. All right, so there we go. So when you're deciding whether or not to evacuate, whether it's Monday or Tuesday, I will tell you with our experience, this is what I was going to say. For folks who evacuated within 24 hours, the day before, you're better off staying at home because the roads most of the time are impassable because there's too many people on the road or there's an accident. Not a lot of ways out of Pinellas County anyway. Got a lot of bridges. If they shut the bridges down or there's some accidents, you're stuck. EOC would rather you be stuck at home than stuck on the road. All right? Okay. So let's go through one more set of graphics. And these are things for the people who are new to the game, new to hurricane coverage. All right? We're going to show you some things that are important to see. Here's the potential rainfall again. Anywhere between 4 and 8 inches of rain, I think, is probably common. All right? Okay. Here we go. So, all the ingredients for development. Yes, we have water temperatures above 80. Unfortunately, where it's developing was not impacted by Helene. The water wasn't worked over, wasn't churned up, so the water is still plenty warm enough along the track. The winds are converging in upward motion with relatively low shear. But you've heard me talk about shear. There's obviously lots of moisture out there. But upper level winds, when they start to blow in different directions as you go up in height, you get shear. That is what we are expecting early next week when that front comes down. And if that shear can push far enough south, we will start to see weakening of this storm. Now, the GFS earlier on, 12Z, said that dry air wasn't going to get in and it was going to maintain its strength. But did you notice the 18Z? Let me go back to that because I didn't even mention that. Let's go back to the 18Z because look what else was happening with the GFS, the 18Z run. By the time it got up into look at the southern part. You got your dry air coming in. So all of a sudden, the GFS is now introducing the possibility of that dry air coming in, and that's probably because it's a little more north of a track, as it was versus the 12Z. So again, you can't get too high or too low based on individual model runs. It will drive you crazy. I think that's my rule number 2 out of my 7 rules, because it will drive you crazy. We look for trends, all right? Okay, next. We all know about the frequency. October is a month, and so is November, by the way, where what develops often in the Caribbean comes up. This is a rare track. This was a Pacific depression cut across Mexico, has developed in the Southwest Gulf, and a trough is swinging it to Florida. This is a very rare track, and unfortunately, it's a track that probably maximizes storm surge threat in a smaller area. So that is unfortunately what we're looking at, all right? So when you're talking about the hurricane formation, at this point in time, all the ingredients are out there. You've got the warm water. It cools with height. That leads to convection, which we obviously have in the southwestern Gulf. And then, as the storm continues, remember, velocity must not change with height. That is what might be dropping down from the northern Gulf. That is shear. If they're blowing in the same direction, a storm will strengthen. If they blow in different directions, it won't. And of course, the water temperature has to be over 80, which it is well into the 80s. Tropical depression forms when you have the winds less than 39 miles an hour, rather less than 38. Tropical storm, which is where we are right now, winds of 39 to 73. And hurricane with winds greater or equal to 74 miles an hour. All right? October, you normally see a downtick in storms, but unfortunately, the uptick that you will see is in the Gulf of Mexico. If you look at this right here, you'll see that little uptick in the middle of October. That is 100% due to the Gulf being warm. These quadrants are very important because usually the front right quadrant is the worst for your maximum impact. However, when you have a storm coming in from the right angle, most of the surge will be coming in south of where that eye is. Category 1 storms typically don't cause a lot of damage other than some trees and branches, kind of like what we had with Helene. Category 2, you sometimes get some shingles down, maybe some trees down, but you typically still don't see structural damage. But Cat 3 is when you start to see structural damage and trees start to go down. Now remember, based on the current track, if it weakens, it's even better. But the current track, we would expect minimal Cat 3, and I think at that along the coast, there will be about a 10-mile area that's going to get those kind of winds. Cat 4 or higher, we don't even want to talk about if we don't have to, because that is when you start to see catastrophic damage, which was the case with Michael back in Mexico Beach several years ago. All right? Storm surge. You get a rise in water. The storm surge, I repeat, I think will be greatest at and south of the eye, about 10 miles from landfall. But not only do you have the rise in water, you also have the waves on top of the rise of water. And a 12-foot surge is a possibility at landfall if this is a Cat 3. All right? And there is, again, the graphic that shows you, you not only have the rise, you also have the waves on top of the rise. All right, guys? So I'm going to recap real quick because my voice is going to be gone by tomorrow, and that would not be good. So this must be the 8 o'clock advisory, which looks the same. I would think they would have updated by now. Let me check over here, see if they have. Pretty sure that would be an 8 o'clock update. No, it's still according to their site, still showing the 4 o'clock Central. So we'll see. Anyway, last check, 40-mile-an-hour winds. The track is updated every 6 hours. This track will be updated again at 11, at 5 a.m., and 11 a.m. Hurricane Center does not like to make massive bumps and changes, right? They take baby steps in their tracks. But if you're going to be watching models on Facebook and on social media and other places, expect massive changes in these models. Look for trends. We will see. My guess is the Hurricane Center is probably not going to change much at 11. We'll see if the overnight models start to show a trend one way or another. The GFS did trend a little bit north. We'll see if that continues or if it goes back south. So that's kind of where we are, guys. I'll be back tonight on TV after the Tennessee football game. And you know me, I'll be updating all night, 24/7. I know it's a lot for some people, but I would rather think people get more information than less when it comes to deciding on what they want to do in terms of their safety. So have a good night. Watch for updates. Take this storm seriously, but this is by no means set in stone, a track and an intensity. We've got a long way to go, and you have 3 days to do what you need to do. You guys have a great night, and we will see you on our next edition of Dennis Phillips Live.